Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying time is here. That's right. We're talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street. Again, on Kill by Kill. Well, greetings and salutations, Internet. It's your old pal, Patrick Hamilton, coming to you once again from 1428 Elm Street. This is the Kill by Kill podcast, where we are dedicated to celebrating the least discussed component of any horror film, the characters. Now, we're going to unpack all the goriest details of the first half an hour or so of the original Nightmare on Elm Street in the hopes that a young student's untimely dream-born end is just the beginning of the jokes we might make at their expense. And as always, there's only one person to trust to make sure that I have a hall pass. The one, the only, Gina Radcliffe. How are you doing today, Gina?
I've gone through my Men in Black memory wipe. Yes. I am ready to at least pretend I've never seen or talked about this movie before.
Yeah, it's very weird to come back to the absolute beginning of a franchise that we completed 4 years ago. But, you know, it turns out this particular episode was infested with a sex pest, and we don't tolerate that shit around here. Oh. So we yeeted that episode, and we brought in a real guest. That's right, Gina. I don't want to scare you, but we are not alone. That's right. We have a very special guest. You may know her best, of course, from her Crooked Media podcast, Ruined with Allison and Halle, the one, the only Halle Kiefer. How are you doing today, Halle?
I'm doing so well. I'm so sorry with the sex pest situation. I'm glad to step in for an iconic film, and I really appreciate you having me here.
I'm thrilled to have you here because, you know, so often in the horror space, we don't necessarily get to cross over with other horror shows. Sometimes we get journalists, we get people involved in the movies, but for whatever reason, horror podcasters are islands unto themselves.
You could say complete weirdos. You can be honest here. We've all got problems. It's totally fine.
Yeah. I mean, I was raised Mormon. It was a weird sitch.
That's so interesting. I feel like I've met so many ex-Mormon horror fans. I mean, I'm a recovering Catholic. I think there's probably a lot of crossover as to why we're drawn to the genre, but that's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you know, your church has a real sex pest problem of its own, whereas
Lord.
Mine has collected billions of dollars to become a shadow corporation.
Oh, so, honey, if you think there aren't sex pests in the Mormon church, I got bad news about every religion. By the way, if you're listening, sorry, it's your religion too. I mean, Catholics did it their own way.
Gina, you're going to have to take over because I'm going to have to take a knee here as I'm now being given information that has begun to rock my world.
I am so sorry to tell you this.
It's bound to happen 3 decades after leaving the church.
Yes. But I get glad we all got out is what I'm thinking.
Yes.
So, Halle, what was your first introduction to the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise?
You know, I feel like I didn't see this as a child. I saw it as an adult, but it pervaded so much of 90s culture that like Freddy was such a character that even if you didn't know the specifics of the movie, he was constantly, I feel like he would stop by Letterman, there'd be Simpsons jokes. Like he was like the claw, the sweater, the hat. I mean, it was the Robert Englund's the camp element. It was so a part of pop culture that even though I didn't see it until adulthood, it felt like, well, I'm familiar with this. And then seeing it, I watched the first act again just to refresh myself. What a phenomenal film. I fucking love it.
Yeah.
A classic for a reason. I mean, just truly great. So I think it was like, probably as a kid being like, I don't know that guy, but I don't want to hang out with him. And then eventually seeing it be like, I can contextualize all the jokes I've heard, like all the sort of like the funny references in different places. So that's always kind of funny now to understand it in a different way.
It is so odd that at one point, Freddy was a VJ on MTV.
Of course.
He had his own 1-900 call line.
Talking doll.
I feel like I think they keep trying to do that. Like I mentioned with Megan, like it's so hard to achieve that level of pop culture saturation in a lasting way. Cause I feel like Freddy was around, well, I guess the franchise was extended, but like, I feel like I want another Freddy Krueger. Like I would love to have a villain of that level again.
Yeah. I mean, he is a very rare beast in terms of the grand horror franchise. It's almost like there's one side where you have Michael and Jason, these towering homunculi who never speak. And so therefore they're a blank canvas that we can project anything we want on them. Like Michael is very hungry for dog, and that Jason should never wear a jacket and is really a fish toilet at a certain point in the franchise and maybe always dead. It's a lot of stuff. Whereas Freddy is happy to tell you exactly who he is. And certainly Chucky is in the same camp. They're almost playing doubles tennis on either side. And so really what we came to the conclusion of, which is weird to put it in volume 1 of what was season 2 for us, but still it should be noted, what we came down to of what really motivates Freddy is he wants to help everyone to death. When you have something you want to get past, he's like, I'm going to enter your dreams and I'm going to make it happen. And what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Oops, I killed you.
Well, I guess that's true. The end of any sort of dilemma you have, it would end with your demise. So it is kind of the perfect solution to any problem. I wouldn't have put it that way, but that makes sense.
He's just like a self-help book writ large with razor sharp claws. And I think what it comes down to.
What he is so compelling about him, like you said, is that he's having the time of his life.
Yes.
He has a smile on his face. He is having a blast. And then that contrast with the teenagers who are screaming for their lives does take it to another level.
It does. And, he goes from, I think this is very, very scary. I still find 2 very, very scary. And then the scares become, they lessen slightly as the scope of it is writ large. And,
well, he gets more wisecracky too.
Yes.
Which kind of it's always amazing to me every time I rewatch Nightmare on Elm Street that he actually does not have a lot of dialogue in it. No. And whereas in the later movies he has most of the dialogue.
Right. He's the star of the show. Whereas here he's a guest star who comes into the Dick Van Dyke show and happens to trip over the couch himself, and Dick's like, "That's my job." He's just got that splashy moment or two.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know if it's his first line, but one of his first lines is iconic, and I feel like this movie. I'm sure we'll get into it. I don't want to jump ahead or anything. But the utility of this movie, I think, really demonstrates, and I really stand by this on our podcast, which is no horror movie needs to be longer than 90 minutes. And part of that is we don't always have to have a big old conversation. You know what I mean?
Right. You don't need to explain everything.
When you see Freddy with his arms, crazy long arms, you don't need to explain anything to me. If I see that, I'm going to say, as Tina says in the movie, oh shit, that's all you need to know. That's all you need to know about him.
Right. If he slices his head open and a couple of fingers and green goo comes out, I don't hey, hold on. You're held together with green glue?
What's your backstory? Where were you from, fella?
Are you made of Nickelodeon gack and you just walk around? How does that work?
And that is and I don't want to leap ahead of, I'm not to jump the format, but I will say I for some reason had forgotten the goo. I don't associate this movie with being a gooey movie, but when you do see him cut open his own torso laughing and it's filled with green goo, again, this movie has everything.
Well, I think it's one of those things where because so many of Craven's movies were cut down by the MPAA, I think he figured, if I'm going to have some very bloody moments in this. I'm going to have 2 very gory deaths. And to balance that, if I still want to freak the audience out, I've got to pick some other things that are not blood related, but can stand in for it. And that's where you get the gack out of his fingers and across his chest and, a body bag full of eels, something we will see. So let's get in. Let's get into the warm bath that is 1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street. Of course, it starts with that original seizure-inducing New Line Cinema logo that I wish they would bring back. If you're doing a movie that's set in the 80s, don't give me that weird, film spoke logo. Give me the one that makes me feel like I'm watching Speed Racer again.
We get a Freddy's Workshop. This old knife claw.
And I think like that is a perfect way to introduce anything. Is that it's again like nothing is. I feel like so many more recent horror movies, like we do a lot of verbal explaining. We hear the wet sound of him walking. We see the blade. We see him looking for his rusty razor blade on his tabletop full of tools. Yeah. We know so much so quickly because it is a visual medium, and every visually like, well, that's not good. That's not good at all.
Yeah, that he is heavy breathing on that soundtrack.
Oh yeah,
he is very excited about the work.
He's enjoying himself.
Engage in.
Yeah. He's either he's got pneumonia or a boner or both. I'm not sure what it is, but this is our introduction to Frederick Bartholomew Krueger here. And perhaps because he's never washing his hands by the look of it. I mean, is he greasing every boiler like a masseuse, just like rubbing it in? Why is he not washing his hands, Gina?
I mean, this is your problem with Freddy Krueger.
This is my only problem.
He's neglectful in his hand washing duties.
Clean up your act. Exactly.
He has a hygiene problem, and other than that, Krueger innocent. I think we can all agree on that.
Oh my God.
Upstanding citizen.
I guess the odd part of the glove building scene for me is that, like, it's during these opening credits and he picks up part of the components in a paper bag off the ground. Like, no wonder this fucker was caught. He has terrible organizational skills.
Yeah, it does really give custodians a bad name. I would wonder what custodians in the 90s are like, okay, it's a little more organized down here, right? You don't have to be like the boiler room, but the boiler room as like, again, the basement, the attic, like the boiler room was again, like not simply a basement with hot water and fire in it.
Yes.
As a child, especially, you're like a room with something boiling is so terrifying. And then to see it, it's like, yep, that seems right. This seems like where this guy would hang out.
I mean, it's one of those things they never quite explain where that boiler room is. In part 2, they drive out to this like empty industrial space. And you're like, I guess. But what is the boiler room service? And I asked this basically because it's constantly leaking. And I really want to know what establishment is on top of this, because it feels like it's the boiler room for the Poseidon Adventure.
Yeah, whatever he's custodying, he's not doing a very good job.
His boss is basically like, Frederick, I love your sense of whimsy and your sweater choices. But like, as your boss, I have to ask, why the boiler room leaks like a sieve. Like, come on, man. We're losing thousands of dollars in water consumption alone.
I'm starting to think that maybe Freddy wasn't that good of a custodian. I'm starting to think maybe he didn't have the skills for the job. He was too distracted with this side project.
I was going to say he's all those long lunches, going and kidnapping and murdering children.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I learned as a dad that I had to cut down on my personal picadillos or whatever my vice might be. And I reduced it down to podcasting and owning every obscure, stupid horror movie on Blu-ray. And that's all the space I have. That's it. Everything else has to be a decent husband, be a good father, and then these two things to the side. And I don't think that you can be the best custodian and child murderer in the world. You got to choose one.
Absolutely. God doesn't give with both hands,
I was going to say, you need some superior time management skills. And we can see his organization skills are already lacking.
Yeah. No.
I mean, does he have ADHD? That is someone, that's seeing this, I'm like, I think I'm seeing this. Maybe he's just so used to it. You want to say, hey, like maybe if you made a list at the beginning of every week, sort of start prioritizing. But of course, we know what he would put on the top of the list, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's true.
Killing children.
Do you think we can convince whoever is in charge of the ADHD sort of association or society, or, the collective voice of that community, that we can make them make Freddy Krueger their poster boy the way the LGBTQIA plus community has picked up on the Babadook? Could he become their mascot?
We think we could probably definitely email them, but they're probably just going to look at something else and then forget to email us back. So
exactly.
we can definitely try it, but we'll see how it goes.
Would it help if I told them that there's a very unique attribute to this version of Freddy that we never see again? And that only comes because this is second unit stuff they're picking up, and, Craven's not behind the camera for any of this. Freddy is wearing sweatpants that are gathered at the cuff. This is the only time Freddy wears sweatpants.
Oh.
But I often think about, what would America be like if we all realized that Freddy throughout it was wearing sweatpants? I think we'd be different as people.
That Freddy was embracing the athleisure lifestyle.
It does feel scarier to me because it's like, wow, you didn't even fucking try this morning. Like, you were so amped to get out here and start slashing. You're basically just wearing your pajamas. You put your sweater back on. I don't like that at all.
I show up to your Steam Dream Dungeon and you can't even put on outside pants? Come on, man.
Have some respect. I'm about to be murdered.
Question, is the glove assembly scene an accurate representation of the actual construction of the murder weapon he used in his crimes? Or is it actually just a part of Tina's nightmare that Freddy is projecting into her sleep consciousness? Are we getting backstory, or are we just getting creep factor for Tina's eyes only?
That's a great question. I think it's backstory because Freddy likes to play the hits. I think he's showing her. I think he's very proud of what he's done and what he's accomplished, and he's showing it to her. And I just want to shout out that what is the actress?
Amanda West.
Amanda West.
Amanda West. Oh, and what a phenomenal, basically a first act for your character. Again, not something that you see in a lot of more recent movies. But just having a great time, excellent in it. I think he's given her a little bit of his backstory, his little prequel.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. I do always enjoy when I see this movie again that its title credits are presented by fridge magnets. Do you want your toddler to learn the alphabet, maybe? Try fridge magnets today. We meet Tina here, as we mentioned, played by the ever delightful Amanda West. And she's fantastic here and elsewhere. But she is not the most graceful of runner. I think they are trying to convey the idea that she's running fast and the world's going slow. And it mainly looks like my kid when I used to teach his children's volleyball league. Oh. And instead of hitting the ball, he would just Chevy Chase pratfall on the ground. Again, it works in dream logic, but as a movie, you're like, what's her problem? Why can't she run right?
I mean, also, she's probably barefoot and everything is moist. So I can't imagine she wants to put her whole bottom of her feet on the ground. Mm-hmm.
There was this thing because I way back when I was part of the people opening up Universal Studios Japan in Osaka. And one of the rituals there is before a building is officially dedicated, you're not allowed to walk on it in your actual shoes. So you would have to cover up your shoes. And if they ran out of cover-ups, you'd have to go barefoot, which was just fine. Until we were up on the rafters of Terminator 2 3D on this grating. And I swear to God, it was like torture. It might be that she's barefoot on grating and that fucking sucks.
Ugh. Yeah, no, thank you.
Wiss is playing Tina here. She's long nightgowns in the sheets and short dick jokes in the streets. And she also is scared by a dreamland at some point. Now, I assume that this is a visual allegory for being led like a lamb to the slaughter, but also baby lambs are not scary. I'm sorry, Halle.
Well, I mean, if we're just kind of walks, I mean, a baby lamb where baby lambs don't belong. That would be jarring to me.
Yes.
Yeah, a baby lamb with a gun, though.
That's true. Once they learn automatic gun, how to operate automatic weapons, we might be done for. We're all looking for these, like the oceans will rise. But what if lambs learn how to shoot guns?
And we seem like we're days away from teaching them. I really think the guns are so insane. Why? I'm sure somebody's out here trying.
Yeah. And so this nightmare goes on where Wiss is frightened at every turn by a Freddy we can't quite see yet. We're still keeping him hidden like the shark in Jaws. But then he comes up from behind her and gives her a giant slash and she wakes up. And oh, thank God, she's back in her own bedroom. But through her front door is the first of one of our favorite character types in any of the films that we've covered, Gina, and that is parents of Elm Street. They all suck.
Oh my God, they're terrible. She looks, the mother just looks annoyed, exasperated that her child has woken up screaming in hysterics. And then, my favorite character is the boyfriend, who about 15 seconds after Tina's mother goes to check on her, basically comes out to her and says, "Come back to bed, babe."
You coming back to the sack or what? It's 3 a.m., asshole. His entire demeanor comes across as these little blue pills don't come for free, That's the context.
Oh, no, the mom says the line that I was like, she's like, well, you either better cut your nails because her nightgown is literally ripped. And we better learn to you better cut your nails or stop having dreams like that. It's like, thanks for the advice, Mom. I'll be sure to stop having dreams like that. A thing that we all know is something that we could do.
Yeah, the parents of Elm Street are beyond the whole, gaslighting their kids into making them forget about a traumatic experience, and yet also keeping them in the same town the whole time.
Oh, absolutely.
Which I don't know, Halle, if you've seen the remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street. If you haven't, don't.
I have not. No.
Avoid. But they emphasize that even more so, that this is essentially gaslighting. They force them to forget, but none of them are any help at all when their children are obviously traumatized. It's just, well, we'll slip them some Valium into their drink, or we'll basically tell them, well, you need to get over this, or and it's just like it's remarkable to me, and it's just like it's a pattern in these movies that like none of these parents are the most helpful thing they did is set up a vigilante mob to kill the child killer, and then stay in the town where it happens.
Now, to be fair, though, I think about my parents. If that's what they did, they absolutely would completely never talk about it again. Like, I think this is a comment on their parental generation, which I think this is probably what they would do. It'd be like, who would have thought that man we murdered, there'd be some sort of consequences? So we just won't prepare our children at all. We'll never bring it up, and then we'll act shocked when somehow someone says, "Hey, did you do this fucked up thing?" That feels like a real parent thing to do. Maybe that's just my take on that.
No, I think it's definitely a theme throughout the franchise. It's one of the most pervasive themes. And so you get all sorts of different levels of abusive, emotionally distant parent. And here, Tina's mom is giving you, looks like she plays rhythm guitar for Stryper. That's what she's giving as a visual. And then, her parenting technique is like, yeah, like stop dreaming or cut your nails. That's the binary choice between these two things. And you're obviously going through. And I think it's a magic trick here that is lost now to the pervasiveness of how people view A Nightmare on Elm Street. Because when you first watched this and you didn't know anything about A Nightmare on Elm Street other than is scary, you were introduced to this lead character. She's chased by this monster. She's the one you're following. You would think this is Tina's story. It's a little mini Psycho set up here where Tina's being projected as our main character.
Yes.
And these other characters as her group of friends who will die around her. And then Craven's like, just you wait. And he flips it on it. And that's lost now over time because Freddie and Nancy are two names that are intrinsically tied together.
That's a really good point. And I feel like it was so satisfying. I guess sort of like the modern equivalent, or not modern, but it's like, oh, you think of like Drew Barrymore and Scream. Like you get the opening, murder, and it is maybe a little bit longer than even now, but it's not this full first act, and it's so satisfying because you are invested. And poor Tina, has to keep trying to ask everyone, like, did you guys have dreams? And of course, they all are having dreams, but her friends are also in denial about it until Nancy eventually gets on board. But yeah, and I guess it also reminded me of the movie It Follows, where it does sort of, set up, when you're a teenager, it's like, well, I really can't ask my parents for help if it's something that falls outside of what I think I could ask them about, So it's like this isolated teen alienation that feels very real. And I'm sure for teens then felt real.
Yes. And so when they are driving to school, we meet yet another favorite recurring characters of the franchise. And there are old friends, the Dead Children's Jump Rope team.
Hell yeah.
My favorite being the small kid in the back who can barely get her arms around that kickball. She's doing great. And so Tina is driven to school by her two best friends, Nancy and Glenn. Now, Nancy is played by genre fave and hair volume enthusiast Heather Langenkamp, while Glenn is played by future wine vampire / unjailed spouse abuser Johnny Depp. So you can tell which one I actually like and which one I don't.
Who gets an introducing credit.
Yeah. Way to go. Round of applause for that shit. It never come out badly in the end for any of us, but what are you going to do?
No.
So it is revealed in this sequence that Tina is like saying, I had this dream. It was really scary. Nancy starts to talk about her bad dream, but they're interrupted by Rod, who remarks that when he woke up, quote, I had a hard-on with your name on it, Tina. And Tina responds with, my name has 4 letters in it. How could there just be room on your joint for 4 letters? Good question. Also, this just in, Rod has a small dick.
Also, to hear a dick called a joint, I don't think I've ever even heard it before.
It seems kind of weird. Looks like 15-year-old suburban white girl is calling it.
Yes. Amazing.
I mean, I think part of it is that I did because I grew up in Southern California.
Oh, okay.
So
there you go.
I'm the one, and joint was something that was bandied about. So I get the feeling like some of this is Craven, who did trust his cast quite a bit to infuse their flavor of how young people actually speak. Because when it gets to the point later in some of his films, like My Soul to Take, and Craven's in charge of coming up with dialect of how a young person talks, it sounds like, how do you do, fellow kids?
Yes. No, you're absolutely right.
Also, for those who don't know, Rod is coded as rough trade, what with a leather jacket and all, but reads more like community college Danny Zuko. Speaking of Grease, the school segments for this movie were filmed at John Marshall High School in Silver Lake, California, one of the first of many Southern California schools to stand in here in Nightmare on Elm Street. And Tina reveals to her friends that her mom has gone on 2 days of business and can they come over? And so we are left to wonder, what is Tina's mom's quote unquote business?
Well, I got the impression that she was actually lying to Tina about it, because I think Nancy's dad or one of the cops later says, the mom's in Vegas with her boyfriend.
Oh.
Okay.
So I feel like that's what she told Tina.
Because the only things I could really think of were that she's either realigning the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva, or she's at a Vital Sleeping in Your Makeup conference. But maybe I'm leaning towards the second, and it just happens to take place in Las Vegas.
We on our podcast, we had a similar question about Sydney's father in the Scream franchise.
Oh, yeah.
And so I can't remember why, but we decided he's a carabiner salesman. And he was going to a carabiner salesman conference because we're like, it's so specifically vague that it's like, what could it be that no one cares to say what it is? We'll land on a carabiner.
It's got to be something so terribly boring. Like he's constantly haranguing locals with, you won't believe this metal composite they just came up with. Like, I don't fucking care.
Yeah.
Half your clients fall off the face of a cliff. We don't care already. No wonder your wife was sleeping around with everybody in town. I just, my apologies to all the carabiner salesmen. Maybe they're satisfying their wives. I don't really know.
Yeah, write in and let us know.
Please write in to Kill by Kill, care of 101 Box PO. And it's backwards. It doesn't matter. Los Angeles, California, 92003. It'll work out just fine for you. Can we talk about what Nancy's wearing at Tina's house? Because I can't figure it out.
I'll be honest, I cannot picture it. Would you give us a visual?
Sure. It is a lot of colors, being pink, a baby blue, a gray with white stripes. It looks like she's wearing the kind of parachute babies are put under in a onesies twosies class. It's a lot of volume.
She makes some interesting sartorial choices in this
She
movie.
sure does. She absolutely does. I mean, it was 1984, so everything's about 3 sizes larger than it used to be.
She's got a lot of sweater vests.
It's one of those things. People look back at the talking heads and stop making sense and think that's a very large suit for theatrical purposes. But no, that was the size of suits at the time. Just put on an episode of Dynasty, you'll see
the oversized outfits with the enhanced shoulders.
The enhanced. And so during this conversation between Nancy and Tina, where they're kind of comparing their individual dreams of Freddie, we have Glenn using a boombox for subterfuge to convince his parents that he's sleeping at his cousin's place. Is the soundtrack he's playing on this boombox like Blood on the Highway? What the hell's going on there?
Yeah, because it's like, we one thing they were watching a movie and it was like, it's an action movie, but it's just like, so you just have a cassette tape of different horrific car accidents. Like, I mean, I guess I'm sure somebody had that at some point, but yeah, it's completely inexplicable.
Yeah, he's saying something like his cousin's house is near the airport or something, so he needs to have airplane noises.
But next to the phone.
How much do you need to convince your mother that you are someplace that you're not, that you need to have this whole elaborate he gave me a cassette tape that I can fool my mother with.
But I think it speaks to what we were saying about the parents, is that she's like, yeah, whatever, fine. Like, she has like no follow. Like, I mean, she's like, oh, what's that? But she's not gonna go over there and check. Sure, okay, someone's murdered outside by a car. I trust you.
Yeah, I feel that Glenn's mom is somewhat like my mom at this point in time. When I said, hey, I'm going to Ryan Harvey's house, she's like, you don't have to come back anytime soon. You're fine.
Yeah.
I have 3 other children that need to be taken care of. Get out of my house. Whereas I felt I needed like some sort of like Mission Impossible plan to get away with it all. Now they hear a noise outside after they've talked about Freddie's sharp fingernails making very specific noises. Tina's porch appears to have a collection of things, including 3 brooms, 1 mop, and a metronome stuck to the wall. That is certainly not the oddest production designed element in this film, but it is odd nonetheless. It's one of the weirder accoutrement collections in this film.
It's just, think of it as an hors d'oeuvre to prepare you for the basement.
Yeah, that basement is fucking wild. I mean, we're getting way ahead of it and outside of the scope here, but Halle, why are they nailing chairs to the wall in Nancy's basement? Like, who does this?
I don't know. The whole setup begs a lot of questions that we just have to. It's almost like, well, that's strange. It's like, well, if you think that's strange, there's a guy in the backyard who's really going to knock your fucking socks off in about 5 minutes here. Yeah.
My favorite detail in Nancy's basement is the dogs playing pool, Zarape in the back. That is, I don't like who chose that? Why is it still up in the basement? Oh, I have so many fucking questions. They're not going to be answered here anyways.
I think we already tried to answer them about 4 years ago.
4 years ago. Check out volume 3 of this season 2. So, Rod is in the backyard. Of course he is. And he's fucking around. He tackles Glenn out of nowhere. And he's made an interesting sartorial choice himself. He's wearing that leather jacket, but then he also has this white button-down shirt that he's wearing, completely unbuttoned, yet tucked into his jeans. that's a look. Like he looks like he's dressed for like he's a romance novel model and he's been asked to attend an HR meeting. I'll tuck it in. That way I'll look professional.
I do think it's funny that he is, when he is introduced, he's usually just kind of a horny goofball.
Yeah.
And then the last minute, like, oh, well, we want to make sure, we want to make it seem like it might be plausible that he might murder Tina. So we'll just have him pull a knife on Glenn. And Glenn's just like, Ron, I'm just going to, that's just what he does.
Yeah, he's a knife puller. That's how he shows his love. It's his love language.
He just, angrily snaps and pulls a switchblade on you from time to time.
You gotta.
Like a Stephen King bully.
He is a weird Stephen King bully, Gina. Again, damn, you're right on the money. He is like a greaser bully out of Christine and every other Stephen King novel. He just, I guess they dress him up a little bit in that button-down shirt. That's the only thing that makes him semi-modern here. Meanwhile, Johnny Depp looks like he was just hatched.
Oh yeah, he looks like a little baby. Looks like he's like a gosling, just a little baby duck.
Looks like his neck doesn't quite work, like it can't quite hold up all of his hair. He's also addicted to those sweater vests. And as a child of the 80s, and I was, this is a sartorial choice I made myself. Like you're seeing me at my most repressed in this. He also goes in for like, hey, Rod's here. It's time for make out fever. And Nancy's like, no.
Oh yeah, she is not having it. She's like, oh, I don't think so.
But it also, I think, we get into this thing where everyone's so like swept up with the whole idea of the final girl has to be virginal. It's like, you don't know that her and, Glenn haven't been having unfulfilling sex up until this point. It's just not vital to the movie to know.
And it's interesting to, I believe at one point Glenn says morality sucks. It's like, to inject the concept of morality into this movie where you all are going to be murdered by a supernatural child killer.
Yeah.
It's like, well, at least you didn't have sex before you had to go to hell or wherever I don't know. Again, very terrifically 80s.
Yes. I'm not entirely. Yeah. I don't know if it's like he's constantly been denied by Nancy or this one time she's like, hey, asshole, we're not here for us to bone down. We're here for our friend. She just happens to be boning down. Exactly. And that is where we get into Rod and Tina's loud sex session. Like it is loud.
Well, according to the, I watched it on Amazon, according to like the movie trivia, they were saying that Craven at some point said, oh, well, actually that was based on a real, I think it was like he moved to LA or he was sleeping on someone's couch basically. And he literally was kept up by the couple he was staying with. And so it is that perfect like teenage where it's like, I guess I'm just going to be in the other room waiting for a ride home or whatever. It's just like, okay, have fun. I'll be smoking a joint awkwardly outside. You let me know when you guys are done.
Or like angrily tossing and turning in your bed and, put the pillow over your head and all.
Yeah.
Whereas like my apartment in North Hollywood, for a long time, there was this constant coming next door. And through the walls, I'm like, what the hell is that? And finally, like after months and months on it, I complained to the people in charge and they're like, oh, don't worry. We're going to take care of it. Whatever that is, it's going to stop. And the next day they knocked on the door and said, hey, guess what? It's not going to stop. And I'm like, why not? And unfortunately, it's an iron lung. And my first thought was, well, how am I going to convince my next door neighbors to turn that off? Because I need to get some sleep.
Oh my God. How long did you live there?
Luckily for me, I moved to Japan and my problems were solved.
Also, what happened? What do we have that's replaced iron lungs? Because that was a thing for a while, but you never hear about them. So what was it? Just like oxygen in the tank you could sort of carry around?
I think it is. Yeah, you just got those portable tanks now.
Yeah, I guess we just like made the scientific progress because I feel like as a kid those were still a thing. And I remember being like, that sucks really bad.
Yeah, I don't want to talk to people through a mirror all the time. That seems like a real bummer of an afternoon.
No, it's polio and botulism. Wow. Okay. Thank you, science, for evolving us past the need for the iron lung for the most part.
Listen, we're only one presidential candidate actually getting into the White House. We're back in iron lungville. So
I'm sure there's plenty of people who are not vaccinating their kids from polio. I mean, like, it's just a matter of time. Oh, God.
The good old days.
Anyway, sorry. Let's get back to these kids getting killed by Freddy, please.
Listen, let's stop with this child murder by proxy of conspiracy theorists. Let's get back to this make-believe child murderer pop culture icon.
Thank you.
So I think Jungle Man fixed Jane is perhaps one of the grossest phrases I've ever heard in my life, but okay.
Oh, God.
But it turns out that Jungle Man cannot fix Jane because in the middle of, after they've had this very passionate sex, Tina falls asleep and is visited by a terrifying visage. And we'll get to that. But I do have one thing to ask, and it's important because in the actual proximity of where this episode landed, we've talked about all of the Friday the 13th movies. And a big thing we learned in there is that one of Jason's superpowers is he knows your fuck style and uses it against you. So my question to you, Gina, is, does Freddy, like Jason, know people's fuck style?
No, because he's never killed anybody in the middle of how could they? Because they have to be asleep. And frankly, if you're asleep in the middle, I mean that's not good sex. If you're asleep so deeply you're dreaming.
Duly noted.
No, I think that he just politely waits until you're done and to fall into that like afterglow sleep.
And he also seems to forget what sex is the longer he's out of the game, because by the time that Freddy versus Jason happens, there's that sequence where he's at Camp Crystal Lake and he's having sex with a dead body, and you're like, I don't think you know how this works. It really comes across as like a virgin saying, this is what sex is. Like I like those breasts because they feel like bags of sand, that sort of deal.
I just talked about the movie Society on this podcast, Bad with Money, which is coming out. And there's a line where someone says of a woman's breasts, your boobs are really sexy. And it's like, yeah, that was part of 80s sexuality, of just saying the cheesiest, worst shit imaginable. That if someone said that in real life, you're like, all right, okay. You have to say everything literally, take the magic out of it. But I think you're right. I think Freddy does not know their fuck style, because if he did, he would make fun of them for it.
Yes.
Because he would not hold back. He would be making fun of them all the time.
Yeah, and I think that, because Freddy, like Pennywise, tends to hone in on your worst fears. Yes. And I think for some teenage boys, the most prevalent fears, they are not good in bed and don't know what they're doing. And I think Freddy would certainly mock them with that before gutting them like a fish.
Yeah. And so during Tina's dream sequence, Freddy is also visiting Nancy, and that's of course where we get that incredible Freddy crucifix wall scene.
That's still so good.
It's fucking amazing.
Incredible.
This movie was made for barely any money, but it just shows you when people want to really make an effect come across, and they come like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? And they all dream up the best way to do it. And they manage to pull it off. It's fucking iconic.
And just to have a mind for those visuals. Like, it's like, you didn't have to establish that. You don't have to like explain it. It's just sort of like to be like, yes, we need the visuals leading up to what's about to happen. It's elegant, and which is not a movie, I would necessarily thought that I would say about a Freddy Krueger movie, but it is.
I think it's very purposeful and Craven. This is the movie where he gets the closest in the early part of his career of his imagination meeting his visual capacity. And I think in later films, a lot of that is just like people taking things off his table. Like they're like, no, you don't need that money. No, you don't have that time, blah, blah, blah. And it takes Scream for him to actually get a budget and an actual writer and a cast full of capable actors where you can go, fuck it. This is the movie I'm going to make. And it's genius. It is arguable whether or not it's Scream or Nightmare as his greatest movie. And I don't think there's a wrong answer.
You know, I think if I had to choose between the two, and of course we don't have to, so it's we're a fictional.
No. Whenever you choose, we're burning the DVDs of that other movie. So you really got to be careful with this.
Listen, I love Scream, but it is Nightmare. What do you guys think?
I think in terms of his fantastical imagination, the purity of a nightmare killing you in real life is what elevates it.
Yes.
In terms of filmmaking skill, I still feel that Scream, they're neck and neck. There's no wrong answer. They're both just at the highest of levels. Gina, what say you?
I think that Scream is the more exciting movie, but I think Nightmare is the scarier movie.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. None of these are wrong answers. They're all right because they're both fucking brilliant. Here's another element that I always forget about this is when Tina, quote unquote, wakes up, she goes to the window because she hears like something tapping against it. And it turns out there's this tooth lodged in the glass. Like Freddy has killed someone and thrown a tooth so hard it's lodged itself in glass. That's a crazy idea.
Perfect. Absolutely. It's like, again, something that takes you a minute to realize what it is. And then your brain starts to fill in all the backstory. It's so good.
Yeah. And so Tina goes out into her backyard filled with macrame plant holders and loose bamboo reed fencing to investigate in her nightgown, which you should never do.
No.
Tina checks out the alleyway behind her house, which is how you can tell we're now in Venice because there's alleyways. And she's scared by a rolling trash can lid, which, let's be honest with you, is kind of silly because we all know that loose trash can lids are just a means for Heathcliff to have a buffet tray for fish skeletons to munch on. They're not really weapons.
I thank God someone brought up Heathcliff during the episode. That's all I have to say.
We have a standing rule here at Kill by Kill Halle, and that is all listeners should probably have a Wikipedia page open just so they can Google references to really catch up with our old asses.
Honey, I remember Heathcliff. Okay, they said, Garfield, you want more of this? Great, here's Heathcliff. I remember. And we loved it. We said, yes, we'll take another one.
Cartoon cats were so fucking exotic in this country.
Oh, my God.
That during the 40s, they're like, how about a dozen cartoon cats? Like, no one, like everyone go, oh, superhero fatigue. At one point in this country, you could name a dozen cartoon fucking cats.
I'm done. I'll be honest. I'm done with superheroes for a while. I say bring back the cats. Let's do that, and then we get tired of them. We'll go back to superheroes.
Yeah, where is the cartoon cat multiverse?
We are ready for a Top Cat revival.
Absolutely. Maybe after the strike, that's what we'll end up with.
Lord, and I say Lord, I mean David Zaslav willing. And so he owns part of me, probably. Oh, no, wait a second. The CW got sold. He doesn't own me anymore. Fuck that guy. So we into the alleyway comes Freddie Bartholomew Krueger, complete with jelly neck. And this is where we get the Freddy arms expanding in the full use of dream logic.
You know, it's so silly, but it's also so creepy too.
Yes. Yeah. It's the perfect balance because it's like, yeah, if you saw that guy, you would say again, oh shit. Like the fact that that's her response, like, absolutely, girl, get the fuck out of here.
You know, he's just like running after her, like, I love you this much.
Again, he wants Tina to feel good. What feels better than a hug? What feels better than a hug with really long arms that can wrap around?
He just wants her to bring it in.
Come on, hug it out. We all yelled in the 2000s when we were watching, what was that fucking show on HBO? Jesus Christ, I've lost my mind.
Oz?
Nailed it in one. I was thinking Entourage, but I think Oz really does count. They did hug some things out.
They tried.
With, some people were desperately trying to escape that, but we'll get into Oz later.
We're going to recap the entire series after this.
after this. I hope you don't have anything on your calendar.
I've got nothing.
This
is it. I just watch horror movies to do podcasts. Honest to God, I got nothing else going on.
So one of the nice little bits here is Craven puts that beyond the door pan to surprise jump scare in here where you see someone running and then all of a sudden they're right in front of you. Halle, have you ever seen Beyond the Door?
I haven't, no.
It's an Italian joint. It's a very exorcist-y sort of thing. And it features a child character who's constantly eating Campbell's soup directly out of the can.
Oh, okay.
It's the second most frightening thing in it. The first is the Beyond the Door pan to surprise jump scare where woo, you're right in front of you. It's really good. And when you rip it off, you better rip it off good. And Craven's able to. During the sequence, we get a 2-finger slice.
Oh, so good.
And Tina also pulls Freddy's face off, which was his face loose to begin with?
It looks like it might have been. It wasn't on quite right. When he cuts his fingers off, in order to set up the cutting the fingers off, I believe he just says, "Hey, look at this."
Yeah.
Yeah, he is. And he's got this look on his face like, yeah, you like it? That's cool. Go see more.
Again, like, he's not being menacing. He's not being dramatic. He has a smile on his face. He's having a blast, which is genuinely the scariest way you could see someone cut off their fingers. And then, of course, the best line in the movie, which just says, "Oh my God," and he holds up his blade glove and says, "This is God." Iconic. This is why this movie is iconic.
There's a lot of perfection on display here.
Yeah.
It's just the right time, the right people, the right actors. Like Craven has finally been able to take that big imagination of his and simplify the concept to the point where, yeah, some of these things don't work quite as well. The extendo arms, not exactly at the highest of qualities. You can see a lot of wire work going on here. Fine. But it's janky like a nightmare's janky. And then you get to the gimbal kill, which is both a feat of engineering made all the more terrifying because they seatbelt Rod into the corner of the shot to ground you. And for him to see Tina being torn apart and being dragged up a wall with a trail of blood coming behind her. It is truly nightmare-inducing, that visual.
Yeah, I love the effect of her like swinging around. She kind of like whacks him in the side of the head.
Like if you tried a million times, you'd probably never be able to hit Rod with the head of your murder victim, and yet Freddy is able to do it. And when that hits, a blood splatter goes everywhere.
Yeah.
And, oh my God. It's an amazing feat of filmmaking technique to be able to spin that entire room and do it in a convincing way. And then again, Halle, do not watch the remake. But when they tried to do it in CGI, you're just like, well, no effort was made here. Like, I get that some graphics person was sitting in front of a computer and made it like look okay-ish. But there's no danger. There's no surreal element to it. Because it's just happening in a computer. It's not in any way, shape, or form as scary, as cool looking as the original.
No.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's incredibly done. It is genuinely fucking scary. To your point, Gina, where it's like Scream, it perhaps a more adroitly made movie. This is a genuinely scary scene that is, we are Rod in that moment watching this and having no ability to do anything but watch. It's incredible.
And then he's being put into a position which many an Elm Street film really covers, which is, I saw something. Mm-hmm. Someone ended up dead. But if I tell anyone what I saw, they're never going to believe me, as teenagers are never quite believed for a variety of reasons. But this movie is very simple in its tack of, you, as a teenager, you're alone in what you're experiencing and feeling. And other people can say, listen, I was a teenager once, but they'll never know what's happening inside your tortured soul.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
I'm sure you could have. If given the time, you probably could have worked it out.
We don't have the time. We gotta watch these teens get murdered.
Then that is a good point. Let's keep on tack. So let's cut to the Cahuenga Branch Library in East Santa Monica, which is subbing in for a police station here. The interiors, however, are at the old Lincoln Heights jail on Avenue 19 in my old neighborhood of Highland Park. So we're introduced to the one and only John fucking Saxon and his incredible comb over.
He's just scowling like no one has ever scowled before.
He doesn't believe you. He thinks what you're doing probably sucks, and he looks hot doing it. It's a real triple fucking threat. Like, this is, I guess, a decade past when we previously talked about him a little while ago on that Starsky and Hutch episode where he plays a vampire, a dance vampire. And like, he looks really hot there. But even with a little age on him, he's still like, man, those smoky eyes, that jawline. Yeah, it's a hot looking dude.
When you got it, you got it. That's what Hollywood always tells us, and it's true.
Yes. And then let us not forget, we also meet Nancy's mother here, played by Ronnie Blakely, either plain drunk or genuinely drunk, depending on who you believe. But either way, it's working.
Oh, this whole exchange, like, Dad seems far more concerned that Nancy had a sleepover where there was a boy there, and he just gets scowling even harder. And then like the mom's like, oh, well, Nancy said that Tina and Rod had a fight. And Nancy's like, well, wasn't that serious? And the mom's like, well, maybe you don't think murder is all that serious.
Yeah, it's like, okay, going, yeah.
It's like
0 to 11, mother.
Yeah, this is a very helpful conversation for you to have with your daughter who, discovered the body of her best friend.
Yeah.
The other distracting element to this particular scene is that Ronnie Blakely, her hair looks like a modified Wolverine hairdo, whereas Heather Langenkamp has the most amazing head of hair that has ever been filmed on celluloid. It is so voluminous. It is so curly. It takes over the screen in a way where you want to dive into it. It's hypnotizing. Just incredible.
You just don't see that kind of hair. There's a period of time in the 2010s where every single woman on television had the exact same hair, which was long with a wave.
Yeah, sure.
And it's like, that was hair frozen in time. This is hair frozen in time. I wish we saw more hair like this.
Truly. It's a gorgeous mane. And they try, I think they get close to it in Dream Warriors of achieving that level of volume. But they're also styling it in a way where all of a sudden she's like a Hitchcock blonde in that, where they give her a gray stripe and she's in very boxy suits. It's a different vibe. But Nancy is told, like, hey, you need to tell us where Rod is. And she's like, I don't fucking know where Rod is. So the next morning she's off to go to school, and she's grabbed off the sidewalk by Rod, who declares, hey, I didn't kill Tina despite not seeing who did. And then out of the shadows pops Lieutenant Thompson, and they capture Rod, who doesn't have shoes on. And
doesn't have shoes on, also has not washed his hands.
Yeah, you can't find like one public fountain to dip those grabbers into. Like, come on, there's got to be a gas station somewhere.
Oh yeah,
Lin Shaye, the immortal Lin Shaye, pops in here as Nancy's teacher once she reaches school. The guy reading Julius Caesar's the most Hollywood version of an LA teen ever. I mean, I'm pretty sure that shirt he's wearing changes color when you put your hand on it. But this is where we get into Nancy's school dream. And we know it's a dream because she nods off, turns to her right, and her friend Tina is inside of a body bag.
Oof, another excellent shot when she's driving away. So scary. Oh, I just want to say before we get into this, I love a movie much like It Follows, which Aaron brought up, which is a movie where in the classroom you're given a little bit of Shakespeare to let you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And the line is, what's seen is not always what is real. And then the conversation is believing that something in humanity is rotten and then wanting to sort of investigate it. And I'm sorry, I was like, yes, set us up, give us like a thesis sentence for the horror.
Yeah, I mean, much like, Laurie Strode in Halloween, who's told about fate in her class when she looks out the window. Like, it's a grand tradition. And I mean, it even shows up in Bride of Chucky, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah, I really like it. And I like, of course, that it's Lynn Shay more than her dirtbag brother, who is another sex pest.
Oh,
Anyways, so she looks out to the hallway, and there's Tina inside of this body bag, pawing inside of it, calling to her friend, which is nightmare fuel. And of course, she then helpfully lays down and is dragged by her heels by an invisible force. I'm not following that. Gina, I love you to death. I honestly do. But if you die and then I see your ghost being dragged in a body bag, I'm sticking.
No,
Absolutely.
that's okay. I understand. I would just be like, well, I hope that all works out for you.
Hey, let me know how that goes. Okay. All right. See you later. Yeah. Alice and I have a pact on Ruined that you can't come back. You can't come back for me. I will not come back for you. If one of us escapes, just keep going. To come back. To know, we have too many incidents where you come back and both of us are killed. Just if you get out, keep going. If you see my ghost being dragged down the hallway, turn around, go back to class.
Yeah, you want to see me again? That's what the rear view mirrors.
I mean, my only exception is I can absolutely, if Patrick and I went on a backpacking trip in the moors of England and got attacked by a werewolf, I could absolutely see myself like haunting him, and just making jokes about how bored I am in the afterlife.
And that would be fun.
Yeah, I mean, that would feel like old times to me. I mean, that's basically what we're doing now, but you still have a nose, Nancy runs after Tina's levitating body and bumps into a hall monitor, something that did either of you have actual hall monitors in your high school?
No.
Was that a thing?
I think we did in theory. I mean, you were supposed to have a hall pass, like to go to the restroom or go see the guidance counselor. But I don't think anybody ever you assailed you and demanded that you show it to them.
But I do like once the person was like, "Where's your hall pass?" and Nancy goes, "Screw your pass." I mean, if I was doing drag, that's probably what I'd be doing.
I love that. Yeah, I did immediately think, I don't have a Halloween costume picked out, and that'd be easier lift than some. It'd be perfect.
All you need is a sharp hand Joe glove, and then a sweater vest and some pigtails, and you're good to go.
I've already got the long hair, so I'm good to go.
Little bit of blood splattered on your face.
Some round glasses, and you got yourself a costume that you'll have to explain to half the people at that party.
Sure. But I think they'll see the sweater and be like, it's probably from one of the movies. I trust you,
The one Halloween party I showed up to a couple years ago, I was from Kids in the Hall, the Bad Doctor sketch, where he comes out and scrubs and just has blood from his neck down to his feet. But they're like, what are you? Are you Dr. Giggles? No, I'm Bad Doctor from the Kids in the Hall. And then I have to do a monologue in front of them.
See, I think I would have assumed, do either of you guys watch 30 Rock, Dr. Spaceman?
Yeah.
One of my favorite jokes was he walks in and everyone gasps. He's covered in blood. He's like, "Oh no, sorry, I was at a Halloween costume and the host dog attacked me, so I had to stab it to death." Anyways, your mother's gonna be fine.
And so Nancy is dragged into the dream basement, where the boilers are turned to sweat, and she's playing a cat and mouse game with Freddy, who we see slice his own chest open and maggots fall out of it. So again, not blood, but we're now being given an alternative that's equally as gross.
It's gorgeous. And again, the smile on his face, just having the time of his goddamn death, I suppose.
Everybody should be enjoying their job as much as he does.
Truly.
If you love your job, you don't work a day in your life or your death, ostensibly.
Well, he stuffed all those maggots into his chest. You got to get them out somehow. And it feels good once they start to fall out, if I'm being honest, as the one person here who's constantly had maggots in his chest.
I trust you. Listen.
And so Nancy is cornered at a certain point and almost by accident discovers a way to wake herself up, and then is to put her arm against a steaming hot pipe, which wakes her up. And she screams bloody murder in front of this entire class. And they look at her like, what gives you the right?
Like, how dare you?
Wait, hold on a second. You just witnessed a murder the other night, and now you are scared in your sleep. Get the fuck out of here. Go home, Nancy.
We're trying to listen to Julius Caesar.
I know, as if like if that happened in my English class, it would be like everyone would just be so happy, like, oh, something crazy's happening. Like, what a fun break that would be.
And then the somewhat prognostication visual that happens here is that for whatever reason in this English lit class, there's a bunch of animal posters on that classroom wall. And I thought, oh, well, that's odd. But then I remembered in the very next segment when she goes to the Institute for Kids Who Don't Sleep Good and want to do other things good. And then up on the wall is this poster of a cat dressed like Magnum PI in San Francisco. And I still think about it.
We got a tremendous amount of pleasure out of talking about that when we covered this before.
You think that the voice of Roger Rabbit would be the weirdest thing in that scene? Turns out, not so much. But that is for the next episode, so we'll get to that then. You know, we can't really play Choose Your Own Death Venture because there's only one real death here. But I suppose we could play Choose Your Own Wound Venture. And that's where we decide of the many self-inflicted wounds that Freddy gives himself. If you were to force to endure one of those and inflict them on yourself, which one would you choose and why? Up for bid, we have slicing your own fingers off. We have your head being pulled off, neck gouging, or chest maggots. And Halle, you're our guest. That means you get to go first.
You know, I'm torn between the fingers and the chest maggots. I think for me, the joyful, the gleeful entreatment to say, hey, look at this, and cut off your own fingers. That being said, the amount of neon green ooze and maggots in the chest does make it the more visually appealing. But I'm going to go with fingers because then when the green blood shoots out, it is the same squelching sound we hear the first when he says workshop. It's like, hey, a bunch of wet goose coming out. And there's something about that where it's like, oh, I cut him off. You thought that was bad enough? Well, check this out. And it's just a green ooze flying out. I'm going to go with the fingers. That feels right.
Okay. And think of all the ecto cooler you're going to have to drink to fill your veins up with that much, green ooze.
I mean, that's basically what I did as a child. Like, I feel like 6 to 8, I was ecto cooler filling my veins.
Gina, what say you?
I too am going to choose fingers because, again, as Halle said, he just looks so delighted. He looks like a child, like about to show you a magic trick he's just learned.
You want to see some? You want to see some? You want to see some? Whack.
He's in the zone. He's like he's really feeling himself in that moment.
He's feeling himself. He is moisturized, as we've noted on this show. We like a damp Freddy more than a dry Freddy.
Agreed.
Dry Freddy's not into it. He's in his lane being your dreams. Yeah, exactly right. I think of these, I am going with slashing my chest and having maggots come out, which is very on brand for me, as everyone has learned over 7 years here on the show. I podcast every episode in the nude, so I'm very comfortable.
Oh, well, good to know. Good to know.
Yeah. Yes. Aren't you happy you have that information? And so that brings us to an end for this particular part of Nightmare on Elm Street. But here's the good news. Not only can you listen to the next part right now, you can listen to the rest of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise right now, as this is filling in that spot. So that's a good thing. Before we go, of course, Halle, why don't you tell our audience exactly where they can find you on socials and listen to you on these here internets?
So you can find our podcast wherever podcasts are sold. You can follow us at Ruin Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow me personally at Halle Kiefer. That's Halle like Barry, Kiefer like Sutherland. And then I also want to promote, so Crooked Media is where our podcast is at. Podcast, of course, being called Ruined. And for Pride Month, but it's an ongoing endeavor, we are raising money for trans rights organizations. Largely in red states, but across America. So it's called the Fuck Bans, Leave Queer Kids Alone. And it is broadly trying to give funding to organizations who are working against LGBTQ legislation, specifically anti-trans legislation. So if you are interested in that and would like to donate, find out what organizations we are donating towards. We just donated profits from our live show this past month and all of our merch. So if you'd like to look at that, it's at votesaveamerica.com/fuckbands. And you can find everything there. And I would just encourage you, Pride Month is over, but the problem continues. If you have it in you to give it a gander, it would mean a lot to me. And thank you so much for having me.
No,
thank you.
An absolute pleasure. Gina, tell all the good people where they can find you on the internet. I
write about movies and television at spool.net. I also have a Substack. It's Gina Watches Things, GENA. And I am on Twitter and Blue Sky under Gina Does Things.
Do it today, people. Check it out. You know where we're on the socials. Rate and review our podcast so it can be seen and heard by more people. Join us on Patreon, where we're doing cool stuff like talking over Friday the 13th movies. We have Chat by Chat where we answer your questions. And we also talked at length about the music video for, oh my God, Gina, what was the name of that music video?
Total Eclipse of the Heart.
Oh, hell yeah. Now that's my kind of jam.
Yeah, we like to go far afield here on Kill by Kills. We don't limit ourselves in any way, shape, or form. And that is one frightening dream logic based music video in which a woman with very tall hair wanders around a boys' school and is haunted by hot teen boys. I think that's what we came down to. It's just a lot of hot teen boys.
You know what? I was thinking of the music video for Celine Dion's "It's All Coming Back to Me Now," which I believe she has sex with her boyfriend, who is some sort of motorcycle ghost. So I think I was conflating the two, but again, dream logic, similar ideas.
Well, also right. These both songs are written by the same person. So
yes.
That's quite understandable.
We're gonna have to add that one to the list of our horror tangentially related music videos. If it's a motorcycle ghost, it's in the list. And that, believe me, that just about does it for this episode. But don't worry, folks, because the body count will continue for myself, for Gina, and for Halle. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.